At 78, Sally Field's heartbreaking struggles will leave you in tears. The sky isn't the limit. It's just the beginning. At 45,000 feet, nothing feels real. The cabin shakes violently, and the oxygen masks fall like lifelines from above. In seat 12A, Sally Field grips the armrest, not as a celebrity or a star, but as a woman staring the end dead in the eye. What do you think flashes through your mind at a time like that? Are you remembering your proudest moment, your biggest regret, the people you love most, or the person you wish you'd become? The plane rocks again, metal groaning under stress that shouldn't exist at this altitude. Through the small oval window, Sally glimpses the earth far below, a patchwork of fields and cities that suddenly seem both infinite and impossibly fragile. Her fellow passengers are praying, crying, some sitting in stunned silence. But Sally? She's having what can only be described as the most honest conversation of her life, with herself. Right here, between one heartbeat and the next, Sally Field's story splits open. It's not the beginning, not the end, but a crossroads, a flashpoint of terror and clarity. And trust me, the road that leads here is even more surprising than the sky falling from above. But that's exactly the wonder of Sally Field. Her life is a masterpiece painted only with the truest, rawest colors. This is a woman who spent 7 decades learning that survival isn't just about making it through. It's about finding the courage to become who you were always meant to be. Before she was a 2-time Academy Award winner, before the headlines, fame, or the applause, Sally was a child in a room where the silence was thicker than fear. She was a little girl who learned to read the temperature of a room before she could read the words on a page. But her journey from that room to the heights of Hollywood will shake you, because it is about more than acting. It's about survival, second chances, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity. It's about a woman who refused to let anyone, not Hollywood, not the critics, not even the people who claim to love her, define who she was allowed to be. And as you'll see, what comes next in her story will absolutely floor you. If you want more true Hollywood stories and masterclasses in resilience, hit that like button, subscribe right now, and don't forget to share this video. Drop us a comment along the way. Does Sally's story remind you of someone, or maybe even yourself? We want to hear your thoughts. Shadows in Childhood. Pasadena, 1952. Picture-perfect suburbia on the surface. White picket fences, manicured lawns, the American dream in living color. But inside the Field family home, darkness crept through every room like smoke. Little Sally, just 6 years old, presses herself against the wall, her small body trembling as she strains to hear her mother's muffled sobs from the bedroom down the hall. The heavy footfalls of her stepfather, Jock Mahoney, echo through the house like thunder before a storm. Picture this: a little girl clutching her breath as chaos simmers, learning to recognize danger before she could tie her shoes or read her first book. Sally's radar was always on, scanning faces, listening for the shift in tone that meant trouble was coming. She became a master of invisibility, shrinking herself down to fit into corners where angry men couldn't find her. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? The lovable, radiant woman we know from the screen was once a child shape-shifting to survive. Jock wasn't just a stuntman who threw punches on movie sets. At home, he was an unpredictable force of destruction, a man whose hands and words went too far, too often. The man who played heroes on screen became the villain in Sally's real-life story. Sally's world was split in two. One half spent, poised on tiptoe, watching for threats, calculating which version of herself would keep the peace. The other half, creating elaborate escapist worlds in her mind where, for precious moments, she could be anyone except the scared little girl hiding in her own home. In these imaginary realms, she was brave, she was loved, she was safe. Most importantly, she was seen. Margaret Field, Sally's mother, was caught in her own survival mode. A former actress who'd given up her dreams, she found herself trapped between protecting her daughter and protecting herself. The weight of keeping family secrets, of pretending everything was normal when nothing was, pressed down on their home like a heavy blanket. Sally watched her mother shrink, learned that women were supposed to disappear to keep men comfortable. It was a lesson she'd spent decades unlearning. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself just to keep the peace? Or felt invisible because it was safer that way? Let us know in the comments. How did you find your own escape, your own source of light? But here's where the story begins to lift. And trust me, you're not going to believe how this little girl transforms her trauma into triumph. Even in the darkest soil, something yearning for sunlight takes root. Sally's instinct for performance blossomed not from a love of applause, but out of sheer survival. With each imaginary role she played, she wasn't just hiding, she was planting seeds for a breathtaking transformation that would one day inspire millions. Every time young Sally slipped into a character, pretending to be a teacher, a princess, a superhero, she was practicing something revolutionary, the art of becoming someone who couldn't be hurt. But what she didn't realize then was that she was also learning to access the deepest parts of the human experience. The very pain that was breaking her was also teaching her how to understand the pain of others. And the way she channeled this childhood survival strategy into Hollywood gold? That's coming next, and it's even more incredible than you might imagine. The Flying Nun Takes Flight. Hollywood, 1965. The air shimmers with possibility and desperation in equal measure. Close your eyes and picture this. A young woman, her nerves crackling like live wire beneath honey gold hair, sitting in yet another sterile waiting room. She's clutching her script so tightly her knuckles have gone white, but her eyes, those expressive, searching eyes, are already working, studying every person in the room, cataloging their gestures, their fears, their hopes. Sally wasn't just another pretty face hoping to make it big. She was a master observer, a student of pain and possibility who'd spent her childhood learning to read people like survival manuals. While other hopefuls practiced their lines, Sally was studying life itself, the way a mother's shoulders sagged when she thought no one was looking. How a security guard's smile never quite reached his tired eyes. The rhythm of footsteps that revealed whether someone was confident or scared. When Gidget came along, Sally threw herself into the role with the dedication of someone who understood that every opportunity might be her last. Frances Lawrence, Gidget, was supposed to be light, breezy, uncomplicated. But Sally found layers even in this seemingly simple character. She brought a vulnerability, an authenticity that made viewers believe this wasn't just another teenage beach romp. This was a real girl figuring out who she was. Behind the scenes, Sally was working harder than anyone knew. Between takes, she'd corner the crew members, asking questions about their lives, their families, their dreams. She studied every gesture, every inflection, building an internal library of human behavior that would serve her for decades to come. The other actors thought she was being friendly. What she was really doing was training for the performance of a lifetime, her own life. When The Flying Nun landed and Sister Bertrille took flight, critics rolled their eyes so hard they probably saw their own brains. Viewers loved it. The ratings were through the roof. But in Hollywood, the whispers were brutal. Sally Field was doomed to typecasting. She was cute, she was charming, but was she a real actress? The answer seemed to be a resounding no. But that's just the surface of the story, and Sally Field has never been about surfaces. Every TV escapade, every seemingly silly costume was a masterclass in disguise. How do you play a flying nun and make millions of people believe? Sally's answer was revolutionary in its simplicity. Find the authentic heart, the real woman beneath the wings and the wimple. Even in the most outrageous roles, she learned to use honesty as her secret weapon. The result? Laughter that came from recognition, empathy that transcended the absurd premise, and the first brushstrokes of a career that was about to take off in ways no one, not even Sally herself, could have imagined. Sister Bertrille wasn't just comic relief. In Sally's hands, she became something deeper, a woman finding her voice, learning to soar despite the limitations others placed on her. Sound familiar? Every episode was practice, every scene was Sally learning to transform constraint into freedom. And the critics who dismissed her? They had no idea they were watching a masterclass in preparation, and you'll never believe how she broke free from this Hollywood pigeonhole. The next chapter is even more electrifying, and it involves a decision so bold it could have destroyed her career forever: breaking free from heaven. By the early 1970s, fame had become both blessing and chain. Sally Field was a household name, her face recognized in every shopping mall and airport in America. Children pointed and whispered, "Flying Nun," wherever she went. But that recognition came with invisible handcuffs. The world saw only Sister Bertrille, cartoonish, cute, and ultimately forgettable. Industry insiders had made their judgment. Sally was a TV actress, a lightweight, someone perfect for Saturday morning reruns but never for serious drama. But Sally wasn't willing to let anyone else write the final chapters of her story. She looked in the mirror and saw what everyone else was missing. A woman who'd survived childhood trauma, who'd learned to find truth in impossible situations, who'd mastered the art of transformation long before she'd ever stepped on a soundstage. The question was, how do you convince Hollywood to see past the wimple? Which leads us to one of the boldest career moves in entertainment history: Sally Field walking into Lee Strasberg's famed actor's studio. Picture this: you're already a household name, already making good money, already beloved by millions. And you walk into a classroom where everyone assumes you're either slumming for publicity or completely delusional about your own abilities. The other students, serious theater actors who looked down on television, whispered behind her back. Some laughed outright. Here was the flying nun trying to play with the big kids. But Sally had learned long ago that other people's opinions were just noise. What mattered was the work. The method demanded everything from its students, stripping away pretense, diving deep into personal trauma, using pain as fuel for art. For Sally, this wasn't just acting technique. It was therapy, archaeology, revolution. Here, in these intense, sometimes brutal classes, Sally confronted the girl she used to be, the wounded, hyper-vigilant child who'd learned to disappear to survive, and began to transform her into something powerful. Right here, let's pause for a moment. What would it feel like to throw away everything you're known for and start over? Would you be brave enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What would you risk everything for? The breakthrough came when Sally landed the role that would change television history forever: Sybil. This wasn't just another part. This was a character fractured by trauma, a woman whose mind had shattered into 16 different personalities just to survive. Sally didn't just prepare for this role, she lived it. She researched dissociative identity disorder, studied real case files, and most importantly, she mined her own experience of becoming different people to survive. The performance was nothing short of miraculous. Sally didn't just portray 16 personalities, she became them. Each alter had its own voice, its own posture, its own way of moving through the world. Viewers watched in stunned silence as this woman they thought they knew revealed depths they'd never imagined. The critics who'd once dismissed her stood in awe. Hollywood had never seen Sally Field like this before: raw, powerful, uncompromisingly real. Sybil wasn't just a performance, it was an exorcism. Sally was proving to the world and to herself that survival could be transformed into art, that pain could become power. the little girl who'd once split herself into different versions to stay safe, had grown into a woman who could inhabit different souls to tell their truths. But what came next? The way Sally Field reinvented herself on the world stage is even more astonishing. Stick around, because the surprises keep building, and what's coming will absolutely blow your mind. Norma Rae and the Birth of a Voice. 1979. Close your eyes and transport yourself to rural Alabama, where the air is thick with cotton dust and the relentless thunder of textile machinery drowns out dreams. This isn't Hollywood glamour. This is the real world, where working-class women punch time clocks before dawn and go home too exhausted to hope for anything better. Sally Field isn't just visiting this world to shoot a movie. She's living it. For weeks before filming begins, she works alongside real textile workers, feeling the cotton fibers embed themselves under her fingernails, watching the way exhaustion settles into women's bones after 12-hour shifts. Her back aches, her hands crack, her voice grows hoarse from shouting over the machinery. This isn't method acting, this is total immersion. Every morning, Sally shows up at the mill before sunrise, not as a Hollywood star, but as just another worker trying to make ends meet. She listens to the women's stories over lunch breaks, tales of sexual harassment ignored by management, of safety violations that cost fingers and sometimes lives, of dreams deferred because survival takes precedence over hope. In these women, Sally sees reflections of her own mother, her own journey, her own long battle to find her voice. This wasn't just research, it was recognition. Sally saw in Norma Rae Webster a mirror of her own fight, a woman who'd been underestimated, silenced, told to be grateful for whatever scraps she was thrown. A woman who'd learned to make herself small to avoid trouble. But unlike the scared little girl hiding in corners, Norma Rae and Sally were done shrinking. The transformation happens gradually, both in the character and in Sally herself. Norma starts as someone who goes along to get along, who doesn't rock the boat even when the boat is sinking, but slowly, painfully, beautifully, she begins to understand that her voice matters, that someone has to stand up, speak out, demand better. Then comes the moment that defines both the character and Sally's career. The iconic scene on the factory floor, Norma Rae standing on a table, holding a sign that simply reads, "Union," staring down the machinery and the management and the fear that has kept her silent for so long. But Sally didn't just shout that word, she poured decades of her own silenced voice into it. She gave sound to every woman who'd ever been told to sit down, shut up, be grateful for less than she deserved. Think about it. When was the last time you stood up for something that mattered, even when your voice shook? Pause, look inward, and let us know one cause you believe in. Your interaction could inspire someone else here. When the cameras stopped rolling, Sally was changed forever. She'd found something she didn't even know she'd lost. Her own voice, powerful and unafraid. The Academy Award that followed was just the golden confirmation of what Sally had always known deep down. She wasn't just an actress anymore. She was a force of nature. But here's what makes the story even more incredible. The real Norma Rae, Crystal Lee Sutton, became Sally's lifelong friend. Two women from completely different worlds, united by the understanding that sometimes you have to risk everything to become who you're meant to be. Crystal taught Sally about real courage. Sally showed the world Crystal's story. Together, they proved that one voice, raised at the right moment, can change everything. But if you think Sally's Hollywood evolution stopped with critical acclaim, guess again. Her journey is about to take an even more vulnerable, deeply personal turn that will reveal the cost of fame and the price of love. Love in the time of stardom. Fame changes everything, especially love. When you're Sally Field in 1977, fresh off the triumph of Sybil, on the verge of Norma Rae, romance becomes performance art whether you want it to or not. Every relationship is scrutinized, photographed, dissected in tabloids. Privacy becomes a luxury you can't afford. Then Burt Reynolds walks into her life like a whirlwind made of charm, charisma, and complications. Picture Hollywood's biggest sex symbol, the mustached god of Smokey and the Bandit, the man who made jumping cars look like poetry. Burt was everything Sally had never experienced, confident to the point of cockiness, comfortable in his own skin, magnetic in ways that made strong women weak in the knees. Their first movie together, Smokey and the Bandit, crackled with chemistry that was impossible to fake. On screen, they were magic. Off screen, that's where the real drama began. Burt swept Sally into a relationship that blazed hot in public and burned complicated in private. He was old Hollywood charm meets new Hollywood rebellion, and Sally, still finding her voice, still learning to take up space, found herself caught in his gravitational pull. But here's the heartbreaking truth. Sally, forever seeking genuine connection, began fading again. The woman who'd just found the courage to stand on factory floors and demand justice started shrinking herself to fit into Burt's larger-than-life world. She became the version of herself that pleased him, that complemented his public image, that made their fairy tale romance look perfect for the cameras. Behind closed doors, Sally was learning painful lessons about love and power. Burt was generous with grand gestures, expensive gifts, elaborate dates, public declarations of affection. But when it came to supporting Sally's ambitions, her need to grow as an artist, her desire to be seen as an equal partner rather than a beautiful accessory, that's where the relationship showed its cracks. Sally wanted partnership. Burt wanted perfection. She craved deep conversation. He preferred playful banter. Most damaging of all, Sally began to doubt her own instincts, her own worth, her own voice, the very voice she'd fought so hard to find. The little girl who'd learned to read dangerous men was ignoring all the warning signs because this time, the danger came wrapped in charm and delivered with a smile. Have you ever felt yourself shrinking to fit inside someone else's life? Share your story. Do you believe true love means changing or being accepted as you are? When their relationship finally ended, Sally was devastated but not destroyed. She'd learned something crucial. Love that asks you to become smaller isn't love at all. It's control wearing a romantic mask. The end of their relationship wasn't just a Hollywood breakup. It was Sally reclaiming herself, choosing growth over comfort, authenticity over image. But love, real love, was waiting around the corner. Enter Alan Greisman. Not a movie star, not a household name, just a successful film producer who saw Sally Field the woman, not Sally Field the celebrity. With Alan, Sally discovered something revolutionary. Partnership built on equality and respect, not showbiz spectacle and public performance. Alan loved Sally's ambition, celebrated her intelligence, supported her voice. He didn't want her to be smaller or quieter or more convenient. He wanted her to be fully herself, difficult days and brilliant days, vulnerable moments and fierce determination. With Alan, Sally learned that real love doesn't dim your light. It provides the safe space for you to shine brighter. They built a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that great relationships aren't about finding someone who completes you. They're about finding someone who supports you in completing yourself. Alan became Sally's partner in every sense of the word. Co-parent, collaborator, best friend, and the quiet, steady presence that allowed her to take bigger risks in her career. And just when it appeared her personal life had settled, life handed Sally another challenge that would change everything. Get ready, because what came next adds a new layer of meaning to her legacy and shows that her greatest triumphs were still ahead. Places in the Heart, Places in History, 1984. Sally Field is standing in an Alabama cotton field, but this time she's not playing a factory worker. She's Edna Spaulding, a Depression-era widow with dirt under her fingernails and steel in her spine. The sun beats down mercilessly as she studies the endless rows of cotton, calculating whether she can save her family's farm, whether she's strong enough to do what no one believes a woman can do. This role chose Sally as much as she chose it. Edna Spaulding was every woman who'd ever been told she couldn't make it on her own, every mother who'd had to become both parent and provider, every person who'd faced impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. Sally didn't just prepare for this role, she inhabited it completely, drawing on every lesson she'd learned about resilience, survival, and the strength that comes from having no choice but to be strong. The preparation was grueling. Sally spent weeks learning to pick cotton, studying the way Depression-era women moved through the world, the careful economy of their gestures, the way they carried hope and heartbreak in equal measure. She researched everything from period-appropriate undergarments to the way dust storms changed the light. Every detail mattered because Edna's story mattered. On set, Sally became a force of nature. She wasn't just acting. She was channeling generations of women who'd made the impossible look effortless because their children were watching. The vulnerability she brought to Edna wasn't performed. It was lived. Every tear, every moment of determination, every scene where Edna refuses to give up came from Sally's deep well of understanding about what it means to survive. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments between takes. Sally would sit on the porch of Edna's house, still in costume, still in character, and she'd think about her own mother, the woman who'd sacrificed her dreams to survive, who'd taught Sally that sometimes being strong means learning to bend without breaking. Then came the Academy Awards ceremony. Sally Field, in a stunning gown that couldn't hide the farm dirt still somehow embedded under her fingernails, walked to the podium to accept the Oscar for Best Actress. And in that moment, decades of doubt, years of being dismissed, a lifetime of feeling like she had to prove her worth, all came tumbling out in 8 words that would define her forever. You like me? You really like me. The world laughed. The phrase became a meme. Late-night comedians had a field day. But what they were witnessing wasn't a silly slip of the tongue. It was a raw, honest moment of recognition. That phrase speaks for anyone who's ever felt invisible, undeserving, uncertain whether they belonged in the room they'd fought so hard to enter. In that moment, Sally wasn't just accepting an award. She was the little girl who'd hidden in corners, finally being told she was worthy of being seen. She was the flying nun who'd been dismissed as lightweight, proving her depth. She was every woman who'd been told to settle for less, standing up and claiming her place. What about you? Was there a time you felt seen for the first time? When someone celebrated your true self? Share below. Your story matters, and you might help others feel less alone. But here's what makes Sally's journey even more remarkable. She was only at the halfway point of her story. The woman who'd just claimed her place in Hollywood history was about to discover that her greatest role wasn't on any screen. It was using her voice to change the world. Sally Field was only halfway through her story. Her greatest triumphs, on screen and in her heart, were still ahead. The surprises keep building, so keep watching, because what's coming next will show you a side of Sally Field you've never seen before. The courage to speak. The 1990s unveiled a new Sally Field, one who understood that with great platform comes great responsibility. Having conquered Hollywood, having proven herself beyond any doubt, Sally faced a choice that confronts every successful person. Do you stay safely in your lane, or do you use your voice for something bigger than yourself? Sally chose to speak. But this wasn't the calculated activism of a celebrity seeking good publicity. This was personal, passionate, sometimes career-threatening advocacy born from lived experience. Having spent decades learning to use her voice on screen, Sally was ready to use it in the world. Women's rights became her rallying cry, but not in the abstract. Sally talked openly about reproductive freedom because she remembered being young and terrified, making impossible choices without support. She championed equal pay because she'd lived the reality of being offered less money for the same work simply because she was a woman. She spoke about domestic violence because she'd seen its effects up close, understood how abusers could hide behind charm and respectability. The backlash was swift and sometimes brutal. Critics told her to stick to acting, accused her of using her platform inappropriately, suggested that celebrities should stay out of politics. But Sally had learned something crucial over her decades in Hollywood. The only opinion that mattered was her own conscience, and her conscience was clear. Speaking up isn't easy for anyone, but it's especially dangerous in Hollywood, where careers can end with one wrong comment, one unpopular stance. But Sally had spent her entire life learning to navigate dangerous waters. The little girl who'd learned to read dangerous men had grown into a woman who could read dangerous situations and speak truth to power anyway. When politicians tried to silence women's voices, Sally got louder. When legislation threatened women's health care, Sally showed up. When younger activists needed a platform, Sally stepped aside to amplify their voices. She'd learned that real leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about using your voice to lift others. So I want to ask you, have you ever taken a stand on an issue, even when it wasn't popular? What was the result? Put your answer in the comments. We celebrate all kinds of bravery here. But Sally's activism wasn't limited to women's issues. As she aged, she became an advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, environmental protection, and social justice. Her own son Sam came out as gay, and Sally became a fierce defender of LGBTQ+ rights, proving that sometimes the most powerful advocacy comes from love. The woman who'd once been afraid to take up space was now using every inch of her platform to make the world better. She'd learned that silence in the face of injustice isn't neutrality, it's complicity. And Sally Field was done being complicit. Yet, for all the battles fought in public, Sally's next moment of truth was waiting, high above the clouds, where everything she'd learned about life and death would be tested in the most terrifying way possible. When the sky falls. And here we are, back where we began, that doomed plane ride in the year 2000, 39 years after a scared little girl first learned to survive by becoming someone else. Now, at 54, Sally Field sits in seat 12A, no longer hiding from the world, but facing the ultimate test of everything she's learned about courage, authenticity, and what really matters when nothing else does. The plane shudders again, metal protesting against physics and probability. Passengers are crying, praying, bargaining with God or the universe or whatever force might be listening. The flight attendants, trained for emergencies but not for miracles, move through the cabin with professional calm that can't quite hide their terror. But Sally? Sally is having the most honest conversation of her life, with herself, with her choices, with the woman she's become. As the aircraft lurches sickeningly, as the oxygen masks dangle like lifelines, Sally finds something unexpected: perfect clarity. In that moment suspended between life and whatever comes next, all the old anxieties simply evaporate. The Hollywood politics, the career pressures, the need to be liked, the fear of not being good enough, none of it matters. None of it has ever mattered. What fills her mind instead are faces, her children, the people she's loved, the characters she's brought to life, the causes she's championed. For Sally, mortality came close enough to brush her shoulder, close enough to whisper its secrets in her ear. And what it told her was this: she'd spent decades learning to be authentic, but this was the first moment she'd ever been completely, utterly, fearlessly herself. the plane doesn't crash. Against all odds, all probability, all reason, the pilots find a way to land safely. Passengers stumble out onto solid ground, kissing the tarmac, calling loved ones, promising themselves they'll live differently. But Sally walks away from that experience more changed than anyone else on board. She didn't just survive, she'd been reborn. The woman who emerged from that plane was Sally Field, stripped of all pretense, all fear, all need to be anything other than exactly who she was. Fate had spared Sally's life, but more than that, it had freed her soul. The later chapters. With her new lease on life, Sally Field dove into the next phase of her career with the fearlessness of someone who'd looked death in the face and walked away laughing. No more safe choices, no more calculating career moves, no more worrying about what other people thought. She was going to spend whatever time she had left being completely, unapologetically herself. Television welcomed her back with open arms, but this wasn't the Sally Field of Gidget, or even the Flying Nun. This was a woman seasoned by decades of growth, pain, triumph, and transformation. On ER, she played Abby Lockhart's bipolar mother with a raw honesty that came from understanding mental illness, not as a plot device, but as a human reality. Every scene crackled with authenticity because Sally was no longer interested in performing, only in truth-telling. Brothers and Sisters gave her the chance to explore family dynamics from the perspective of a woman who'd survived her own complicated family. Nora Walker wasn't just a character. She was every strong woman who'd held a family together through sheer force of will, who'd made mistakes and learned from them, who'd discovered that being the matriarch means being both fierce and vulnerable. But it was her role in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln that proved Sally Field had reached the peak of her artistic powers. As Mary Todd Lincoln, Sally didn't just portray a historical figure. She channeled the complexity of a woman living through unimaginable trauma while supporting a husband carrying the weight of a fractured nation. The preparation was vintage Sally Field, exhaustive research, complete immersion, and the emotional courage to inhabit someone else's pain. She studied Mary Lincoln's letters, her medical records, her relationship with her husband and children. She understood that Mary Lincoln wasn't just the president's wife. She was a woman grappling with mental illness, the loss of children, and the loneliness of being married to history. Sally's advocacy work intensified during these later years. Her son Sam's coming out had made LGBTQ+ rights personal for her, and she became a vocal supporter of marriage equality, anti-bullying campaigns, and organizations supporting LGBTQ+ youth. She understood that her voice carried weight, and she used it responsibly. Environmental protection became another cause close to her heart. Sally had always been connected to the earth, from her childhood in California to her time on Depression-era farms, and she couldn't stay silent as climate change threatened the planet her grandchildren would inherit. Her greatest legacy during this period wasn't any single role or cause. It was the daily choice to be authentic. Sally Field taught a generation of women that age wasn't something to hide or apologize for, but something to embrace. She showed them that growing older meant growing freer, that wrinkles were just evidence of laughter and tears honestly earned. And yes, the best is still yet to come, for all of us who dare to embrace our imperfect, evolving selves. What comes next in your story could be even more surprising, if you let yourself grow the way Sally Field did. Lessons in resilience. Today, at 78, Sally Field stands as living proof that our wounds don't have to define us. They can refine us. Her life reads like a masterclass in transformation. How to take the worst things that happen to you and alchemize them into wisdom, compassion, and purpose. The little girl who learned to read dangerous rooms grew into a woman who could read scripts, audiences, and social movements with equal skill. The child who shapeshifted to survive became an actress who could inhabit any character with complete authenticity. The woman who once made herself smaller to fit into someone else's life expanded to fill every space she entered. Sally's journey teaches us that resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward. It's not about returning to who you were before the trauma, but about becoming who you were always meant to be because of it. Her childhood abuse didn't make her weak. It made her empathetic. Her early typecasting didn't limit her. It taught her to find depth in unexpected places. Her failed relationships didn't break her. They showed her what real love looks like. True authenticity, Sally shows us, is not one giant leap, but 1,000 daily choices. To tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. To take up space even when others want you to shrink. To speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And to love yourself through every season of growth and change. Most critically, Sally Field proves that it's never too late to change your story. At 78, she's still evolving, still growing, still surprising herself and everyone around her. She's dating again, traveling the world, taking on new challenges, proving that life doesn't end at any particular age. It just gets more interesting. Sally's life is a roadmap for anyone who's ever felt stuck, silenced, or small. Her message is simple but revolutionary. You are not your trauma. You are not your mistakes. You are not other people's opinions of you. You are the author of your own story, and you can rewrite it anytime you have the courage to pick up the pen. So as we close Sally's remarkable journey, ask yourself, what story will you write with your second chance? What single act of bravery could transform your life next? Pause the video, reflect, and then let us know below. We'd love to celebrate your milestones, big or small. The woman who once hid in corners now lights up rooms. The actress who was once dismissed as lightweight now carries the weight of wisdom with grace. The little girl who learned to survive by becoming someone else finally learned the most important lesson of all. Being yourself is the greatest performance you'll ever give. Sally Field's story isn't over. At 78, she's still writing new chapters, still growing, still becoming. And that's perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all. As long as you're breathing, you're becoming. As long as your heart is beating, your story can change. As long as you have courage, you can transform your pain into purpose, your struggles into strength, your survival into your legacy. Sally Field's story isn't over. At 78, she's still writing new chapters, still growing, still becoming. And that's perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all. As long as you're breathing, you're becoming. As long as your heart is beating, your story can change. As long as you have courage, you can transform your pain into purpose, your struggles into strength, your survival into service to others. The plane that almost took her life in 2000 didn't end Sally Field's story. It liberated it. It stripped away everything that didn't matter and left her with everything that did. Love, authenticity, courage, and the understanding that every day above ground is a gift to be used wisely. From the scared little girl pressing herself against the wall to the woman who now fills every room she enters with light and laughter, Sally Field has shown us what's possible when you refuse to let anyone else write your story. She's proved that the most powerful performance you'll ever give is simply being yourself, flaws, scars, triumphs, and all. Her journey from victim to survivor to thriver reminds us that we're all works in progress, that healing happens in layers, that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and choosing to keep growing. Sally Field didn't just overcome her circumstances, she transformed them into wisdom that continues to inspire millions around the world. At 78, she remains a testament to the power of reinvention, the beauty of authenticity, and the truth that your story isn't over until you say it is. She's still acting, still advocating, still showing up fully as herself in a world that often asks women to disappear as they age. Sally Field's legacy isn't just her 2 Academy Awards or her iconic roles. It's the permission she gives all of us to be imperfect, to keep growing, to speak our truth even when our voices shake, and to believe that our most beautiful chapters might still be ahead of us. If you found Sally's journey as inspiring as we did, please like, share, and subscribe for more incredible true stories that empower and uplift. Join our community of storytellers and survivors. Your voice just might change a life. Every like, every share, every comment helps us reach someone who needs to hear that their story can change too. Thank you for being part of our community. What kind of videos would you like us to make next? Let us know in the comments. See you on the next video.